My billionaire father threw me out at 16 after I recorded him confessing to murder. For 15 years I lived as a homeless nobody while he built a $3.2 billion empire. He had no idea his bastard son was about to destroy everything. My name is Alex Morrison. My father is Richard Morrison, CEO of Morrison Industries. Oil, real estate, tech investments. You've seen him on Forbes covers, CNBC interviews, charity galas with politicians. What you haven't seen is the recording on my phone from March 15, 2008. My father's voice, crystal clear. I killed Senator Bradley myself. Made it look like a heart attack. The man was going to destroy the oil subsidies bill. I was 16, hiding in his home office closet, recording evidence for a school project about successful businessmen. Instead, I captured a confession that would bring down a billionaire and change American politics forever. That night, I tried to confront him. Thought maybe there was an explanation, maybe I misunderstood. "Dad, I heard you talking about Senator Bradley." His face went white, then red, then something I'd never seen before. Pure, calculating rage. "You little bastard! You recorded me?" I tried to explain, tried to show him I just wanted to understand. Instead, he grabbed my phone, smashed it against the wall, and called security. "Get this piece of shit out of my house. If I ever see him again, I'll have him committed to a mental institution. And if he ever tells anyone what he thinks he heard, I'll make sure nobody believes the lies of a deranged teenager." That was February 20th, 2009. I was 16 years old, standing in the rain outside our $15 million estate with a backpack and $200 cash. My own father had just disowned me for discovering his darkest secret. But he made one critical mistake. The phone he smashed wasn't the one with the recording. 15 years of hell followed. 15 years of shelters, odd jobs, sleeping in cars, eating from dumpsters. 15 years of being invisible while watching my father become increasingly powerful and respected. But the first year was the worst. I tried going to police with the recording, desperate and naive. Detective Frank Williams looked at me like I was insane. "Some homeless kid claims Richard Morrison is a murderer? Kid, you need psychiatric help, not police help." What I didn't know was that Detective Williams had just received a $50,000 charity donation to his retirement fund from Morrison Industries. My father's tentacles reached everywhere, even into the police department. At 18, I tried the FBI. Agent Sarah Chen actually listened to the recording, had it analyzed by their tech team. 3 weeks later, she called me back to a dingy coffee shop in downtown Dallas. "The audio is authentic but legally inadmissible, recorded by a minor without consent in a private residence. Even if it's real, we can't use it." I felt my world collapsing again. "So he gets away with murder?" Agent Chen leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Not necessarily. Let me tell you something that's not in any official file. Your father isn't just a killer, kid. He's the center of a corruption network we've been trying to crack for 7 years. She pulled out a thick folder filled with photographs, financial documents, and surveillance reports. Morrison Industries has been laundering money for 3 different crime families. They've bribed 47 politicians across 6 states. They've been dumping toxic waste in protected wetlands since 2003. Your father orchestrates it all. The photos showed my father meeting with known criminals. Tony Marcelli from the Chicago mob, Viktor Petrov from Russian organized crime, cartel representatives from Mexico. But every time we get close, witnesses disappear. Evidence gets destroyed, prosecutors suddenly drop cases. Your father has turned corruption into an art form." She showed me a list of names. 12 people who'd tried to expose Morrison Industries over the years. 7 were dead under suspicious circumstances. 3 had recanted their testimony after receiving death threats. 2 had simply vanished. Senator Bradley was our inside man. He was feeding us information about the oil subsidies fraud. 2 days before his testimony to Congress, he told us Morrison had offered him $10 million to stay quiet. Bradley refused. Agent Chen paused, letting the implications sink in. 72 hours later, he was dead of a heart attack during his morning jog, No witnesses, no forensic evidence, perfect timing to prevent his testimony. She slid the recording device back across the table. This recording proves Morrison is capable of murder, but we need more. Financial records, communication logs, witness testimony, payment trails. How am I supposed to get that? I'm homeless. I have nothing. You have something more valuable than money or connections, kid. You're invisible. Rich people don't see homeless people as human threats. You could get closer to Morrison than any FBI agent ever could. She gave me her personal card and a secure phone. Your father isn't just a killer. He's the keystone holding together the largest corruption network in American history. That recording could be the key to bringing down dozens of criminals, saving hundreds of lives, and recovering billions in stolen money. Agent Chen stood to leave, then turned back with a warning. But Alex, if you choose this path, you're choosing war with one of the most dangerous men in America. He's killed to protect smaller secrets than his own son hunting him. Be smarter than Senator Bradley was. Agent Chen became my only ally in law enforcement, checking on me every few months, reminding me that someone in the system believed me. She retired in 2019, but not before introducing me to Agent Marcus Rodriguez, who inherited our unofficial partnership. The streets taught me survival, but they also taught me investigation. I learned to follow paper trails by tracing stolen goods. I learned surveillance by watching drug dealers avoid police. I learned patience by waiting hours for charity kitchen meals. Most importantly, I learned that power creates blindness. Rich people don't see homeless people as human. We're invisible, which makes us perfect spies. I started following my father, learning his routines, his meetings, his secrets. He never noticed the homeless guy cleaning windows outside his office building or picking up trash near his country club. In 2015, I witnessed him meeting with Congressman Jake Miller in a parking garage at 2 a.m. Money changed hands, thick envelopes, clearly cash. I photographed everything from behind a dumpster, but I also heard their conversation through the ventilation grate I was hiding near. The EPA is asking too many questions about the Louisiana refinery, Congressman Miller whispered nervously. Inspector Walsh is pushing for a full environmental audit. My father's voice was ice cold. Then convince Walsh to back off. You've taken $200,000 from me this year, Jake. Time to earn it. I can't just call off a federal inspector, Richard. People will ask questions. Then give Walsh a reason to drop the investigation. I hear his daughter is applying to Stanford. Expensive school. Maybe she needs a scholarship from the Morrison Foundation. That's bribery. That's business, Jake, unless you prefer the alternative. The threat was subtle but clear. I photographed Miller's panicked expression as he realized he was trapped. What alternative? Ask Senator Bradley. Miller went pale. Even he understood the reference. 3 weeks later, EPA Inspector Daniel Walsh quietly closed his investigation, citing insufficient evidence of environmental violations. His daughter received a full scholarship to Stanford that fall. I documented everything. The payoff photos, audio recordings, Walsh's daughter's scholarship announcement, the closed EPA investigation. A perfect chain of corruption that proved my father hadn't changed since Senator Bradley's murder. In 2017, I saw him threaten EPA Inspector Daniel Walsh outside a restaurant. Your family lives at 1247 Oak Street, right? Nice kids. Be a shame if something happened to their school. I recorded the entire conversation, but what I witnessed 3 days later was even more disturbing. Walsh's son, Tommy, age 8, was walking home from school when a black SUV slowly followed him for 6 blocks. I was across the street pretending to panhandle when I saw Tommy duck into a convenience store, clearly terrified. The SUV waited outside for 20 minutes before driving away. That evening, Inspector Walsh received a package at his home. Photos of Tommy walking to school, playing in his backyard, sleeping in his bedroom. No note needed. The message was clear. Walsh dropped his Morrison Industries investigation the next morning. but I had photographed the entire operation. The SUV, license plate clearly visible. The men inside, faces captured. Walsh's terrified expression when he opened the package. I sent copies to Agent Chen immediately. 2 months later, the FBI arrested both men from the SUV on child endangerment charges. They rolled on Morrison Industries immediately, providing detailed testimony about the intimidation operation. My father never suspected that a homeless witness had triggered their arrest. By 2020, I had evidence of dozens of crimes: bribery, extortion, environmental cover-ups, tax evasion, but still nothing that directly connected to Senator Bradley's murder. Each incident followed the same pattern. My father would identify a threat, apply pressure through bribes or intimidation, then escalate to violence if necessary. Senator Bradley had simply been the first to refuse both the carrot and the stick. My father's influence reached everywhere. Money bought silence, power bought protection. But those 15 years weren't wasted. They were my education. Living on the streets teaches you things no business school ever could. You learn to read people instantly: who's dangerous, who's generous, who's lying. You learn to survive on nothing, to make connections in impossible places, to become invisible when necessary. More importantly, you learn that the system is rigged for people like my father. Wealth creates immunity, power creates truth, connections create reality. I worked every job imaginable: dishwasher, construction worker, night janitor, delivery driver. Saved every penny, studied every night at public libraries, learned everything I could about business, technology, and most importantly, how to bring down powerful men. By 25, I had my GED and was taking online computer science courses. By 28, I was working tech support during the day and building apps at night. By 30, I'd sold my first software company for $2.3 million. Nobody connected Alex Morrison, the tech entrepreneur, with Alexander Morrison, the disowned son. I'd legally changed my name, built a new identity, created a backstory that checked out perfectly. But I never forgot the recording, never forgot the promise I made standing in that rain 15 years ago. I would destroy Richard Morrison completely, publicly, and permanently. The first phase was building resources. The second phase was gathering intelligence. The third phase was positioning myself for the kill shot. By 2023, I was ready to begin. Morrison Industries went public in 2022. My father, now 68, needed fresh capital for his renewable energy pivot, the ultimate irony for a man who'd killed to protect oil subsidies. But I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 years. In 2019, I sold my second tech company for $12 million. Instead of celebrating, I used the money to hire the best private investigators money could buy. Former FBI agents, ex-CIA operatives, retired federal prosecutors. I told them I was researching corporate fraud for a documentary film. They uncovered Morrison Industries' hidden financial structure: 47 shell companies across 12 countries, $600 million in offshore accounts, fake contracts worth hundreds of millions. The renewable energy pivot wasn't just failing. It was an elaborate money laundering operation. Solar panel contracts with fake Chinese manufacturers, wind farm investments in non-existent properties, government green energy grants fraudulently obtained through fabricated environmental impact reports. My private investigators also found something else. Morrison Industries was hemorrhaging money. The renewable energy pivot was failing catastrophically. They'd overpaid for solar companies, underestimated regulatory challenges, and faced massive lawsuits from environmental groups. But more importantly, they found the smoking gun I'd been searching for since 2008. Senator Bradley's death investigation had been officially closed, but one detective had kept working the case privately. Detective Ray Thompson suspected foul play but could never prove it. When he retired in 2018, he'd taken copies of all the evidence files home. My investigators tracked him down in Florida. For $25,000, Detective Thompson sold me everything: autopsy reports, witness statements, financial records from the weeks before Bradley's death, and most crucially, a list of phone calls made from Morrison Industries to a known assassin named Viktor Kozlov. But Thompson gave me something else that changed everything: his personal investigation notes. "Kid, I worked that case for 10 years after it was officially closed," Thompson told me during our clandestine meeting in a Miami Beach hotel room. "Your father wasn't just connected to Bradley's death. He was the architect of a systematic elimination program." Thompson spread out dozens of files across the hotel bed: newspaper clippings, death certificates, FBI reports, medical examiner files. "Look at this pattern. 2003. Journalist Maria Santos dies in a car accident 3 days before publishing an exposé about Morrison Industries waste dumping. 2005. Whistleblower Tom Henderson has a heart attack at age 34. No prior medical history. 2007. EPA scientist Dr. Rebecca Kim commits suicide by jumping from her apartment balcony the night before testifying about falsified environmental reports." The photos were haunting. Crime scenes that looked like accidents, suicides, or natural deaths, all perfectly timed to protect Morrison Industries from exposure. Every death looked clean, no obvious signs of foul play. But the timing was always perfect: right before testimony, right before publication, right before investigations could proceed. Thompson pulled out a thick folder marked Kozlov. "Viktor Kozlov is a specialist. Former Spetsnaz, trained in undetectable elimination techniques. Heart attacks induced by exotic poisons. Car accidents caused by remote-controlled devices. Suicides staged with psychological manipulation and untraceable drugs." The files showed Kozlov's travel patterns: always arriving in target cities 48, 72 hours before the deaths, always leaving within 6 hours after, always using different aliases, always paying cash, always avoiding surveillance cameras. The calls were made 3 days before Senator Bradley's heart attack. But here's what the FBI never discovered. Kozlov was paid for 12 different jobs between 2003 and 2008, all connected to people threatening Morrison Industries. Thompson showed me bank records he'd obtained through unofficial channels. $2.5 million flowing from Morrison Industries' offshore accounts to Viktor Kozlov's Swiss bank account, paid in 3 installments for each job. Your father didn't just kill Senator Bradley, kid. He killed anyone who threatened his empire. Bradley was just the most high-profile victim. But Thompson's most shocking revelation came last. "I have reason to believe Kozlov is still on Morrison's payroll. 2 suspicious deaths in 2019 and 2021, both people investigating Morrison Industries. Same pattern, same methods, same payment structure." He handed me a current photograph. Viktor Kozlov at Dallas Airport, dated just 3 months earlier. "Your father is still having people killed, Alex, and if he ever discovers what you're planning, you'll be next on Kozlov's list." I bought 0.3% of shares through shell companies, enough to attend shareholder meetings, not enough to trigger disclosure requirements. I studied every filing, every earnings call, every strategic decision. My father's empire was built on a foundation of debt, creative accounting, and investor confidence. Remove any one pillar, and the whole structure would collapse. But I needed inside access. I needed to get close enough to plant the explosives that would bring down the house. That's when I discovered Morrison Industries was hiring a new chief technology officer. The job posting was perfect. Visionary leader needed for digital transformation initiative. Must have experience scaling tech companies and disrupting traditional industries. The irony was perfect. My father was going to hire his own son to implement the technology that would destroy him. But first, I needed to become someone he'd actually want to hire. I spent 6 months creating the perfect candidate profile. Alex Morrison, tech entrepreneur with 2 successful exits. MIT computer science degree, earned through their online program while homeless. Expertise in cybersecurity, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. I hired a team of consultants to craft my background story. Orphaned at 16, worked his way through college, built his first company at 25, known for innovative solutions to complex problems. Every reference was real. Every accomplishment was verified. Every detail checked out perfectly because I'd actually lived the sanitized version of the truth. The interview process took 3 months. I met with the entire C-suite, presented transformation strategies, even had dinner with board members. Everyone was impressed with my vision for modernizing their operations. The final interview was with Richard Morrison himself. Walking into his office 15 years after he'd thrown me out was surreal. He'd aged dramatically, gray hair, deep wrinkles, the stress of managing a failing empire clearly taking its toll. He had no idea who I was. 15 years of homelessness had changed my appearance completely. The scared 16-year-old boy was now a confident 31-year-old man in an expensive suit, but I studied every detail of his office. The same mahogany desk where he'd signed Senator Bradley's death warrant. The same leather chair where he'd sat while confessing to murder. The same window where he'd stood 15 years ago, watching security escort his son into the rain. "Alex, your background is impressive," he said, reviewing my resume. "But I need to know you can handle pressure. This industry destroys weak leaders." I looked directly into his eyes, the same eyes that had shown such cold rage years ago. "Mr. Morrison, I've survived things that would break most people. I understand what real pressure looks like. I've been tested in ways that most executives never experience." He leaned forward, intrigued. "What kind of testing?" This was my moment. The chance to hint at the truth without revealing it. I spent years with nothing. Absolutely nothing. Had to build everything from scratch with no help, no safety net, no family support. When you've clawed your way up from the bottom, corporate pressure feels like a luxury problem. His eyes narrowed slightly. Something about my words triggered a memory, but he couldn't place it. Interesting. Most people from privileged backgrounds don't understand that kind of struggle. I wasn't from a privileged background, sir. I was abandoned by someone who should have protected me. The room went silent for a moment. I could see him processing my words, trying to understand why they felt familiar. "Well," he said finally, "that kind of adversity builds character. It builds the hunger for success that I value in my executives." He smiled and extended his hand. "Welcome to Morrison Industries." As we shook hands, I felt the weight of 15 years of planning converging on this single moment. The scared boy he'd thrown away was now sitting across from him as an equal, about to implement his destruction. "I won't let you down, Mr. Morrison," I said, meaning every word. He had no idea how true that statement was. Phase 3 was complete. Now the real work could begin. My first 6 months as CTO were flawless. I modernized their IT infrastructure, implemented new security protocols, digitized their operations. Everyone praised my work. My father called me the smartest hire he'd ever made. But every improvement I made was also a weapon I was building. The new security system? I had backdoor access to everything. The digital transformation? I could track every transaction, every communication, every dirty secret. The modernized operations? I could trigger systematic failures at the perfect moment. While appearing to strengthen Morrison Industries, I was actually creating the infrastructure for its complete destruction. But 3 months into the job, something happened that nearly derailed everything. I was working late, downloading files from my father's personal computer, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone else was in the building at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. I quickly minimized my screens and pretended to be reviewing code when my father walked into my office. "Alex, what are you doing here so late?" My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "Working on the cybersecurity upgrade. I wanted to test our systems when the network traffic was minimal." He sat down across from my desk, studying my face with an intensity that made me nervous. "You know, you remind me of someone. Can't quite place it, but there's something familiar about you." This was dangerous territory. I needed to deflect without arousing more suspicion. "I get that sometimes. Apparently I have one of those faces." "No, it's not your face, it's your intensity. The way you focus on details. Very methodical, very patient. like you're always planning 3 moves ahead. He was describing exactly the traits that would destroy him, but he didn't realize it. I learned early that success requires preparation. Rushing leads to mistakes. Smart approach. You know, I had a son once who was like that. Very observant, very thorough, always asking questions, always trying to understand how things worked. My blood went cold. He was talking about me, the child I used to be before he destroyed my life. What happened to him? I asked, genuinely curious about how he rationalized his actions. His expression darkened, and for a moment I saw genuine pain in his eyes. He betrayed me, got involved in things that could have destroyed everything I'd built. Stupid kid was recording conversations, gathering evidence like some kind of amateur detective. The irony was staggering. He was describing exactly what I was doing at that moment. That sounds serious. It was. The boy stumbled onto information that could have sent me to prison for life. Corporate secrets, financial arrangements, personal matters that weren't his business. I pushed further, needing to understand his perspective. What kind of secrets? He studied my face carefully, as if evaluating whether I could be trusted with the truth. Let's just say that building an empire requires making difficult decisions. Sometimes you have to eliminate obstacles that threaten everything you've worked for. The euphemism was chilling. He was talking about murder like a business strategy. Eliminate obstacles. Competitors, investigators, politicians who won't stay bought. People who think they can destroy what took decades to build. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline he partially owned. My son recorded me discussing one of those eliminations. A senator who was going to destroy billions in legitimate business through his naive environmental crusade. I could barely control my breathing. He was confessing again 16 years later to the same crime that had torn our family apart. So what did you do? I had to make a choice between family loyalty and business survival. The boy was threatening to expose everything out of some misguided sense of justice. Business won? Business always wins, Alex. Family is a luxury that successful men can't always afford. Sometimes you have to sacrifice personal relationships for the greater good. The callousness was breathtaking. He'd thrown his own son into the streets and convinced himself it was justified. That's a hard lesson, but probably necessary at your level of success. Exactly. I'm glad you understand that. Too many people let emotions cloud their judgment. He returned to his chair, leaning forward with sudden intensity. The truth is, Alex, that boy could have been my partner in all this. Could have inherited an empire worth billions. Instead, he chose to be my enemy. Do you ever regret it? The question hung in the air for a long moment. I saw something flicker across his face. Doubt, pain, maybe even remorse. Regret is a luxury I can't afford. But sometimes I wonder what he became, whether he survived on his own, whether he ever understood why I had to choose business over blood. I wanted to scream, to tell him exactly what his choice had cost me. 15 years of hunger, cold, fear, and loneliness. 15 years of watching him prosper while I struggled to survive. Instead, I nodded sympathetically. I'm sure he understood eventually. Family decisions are always the hardest. He stood to leave, then turned back with a strange expression. Alex, if you ever discovered something that could damage this company, something that previous employees might have recorded or documented, you'd bring it to me immediately, right? The question was so specific, so targeted that I knew he was testing me. Somehow, on some level, he suspected who I was. Of course, Mr. Morrison. Company loyalty is everything. Good. Because betrayal is the one thing I never forgive. The one thing I never forget. His eyes bore into mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I've had people killed for less than what my son tried to do. 12 people over the years who thought they could expose my business practices. All of them are dead now. The threat was crystal clear. If he discovered my identity, I would join the list of people Viktor Kozlov had eliminated. I understand completely, sir. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. I hope you do, Alex, because the consequences of betrayal in my organization are permanent. He left, but the message was clear. He was watching me now, evaluating my every move. That weekend, I accelerated my timeline. If he was getting suspicious, I needed to move faster. My first target was their renewable energy division, the source of their current financial crisis. I discovered they'd been hiding losses through offshore subsidiaries and fraudulent contracts with shell companies. Classic accounting fraud, worth about $400 million in fabricated revenue. But I also found something else. My father was planning to frame the previous CTO for the fraud. James Mitchell had been fired 6 months before I arrived, and my father was systematically building a case that Mitchell had orchestrated the entire scheme. James Mitchell was innocent, about to be destroyed to protect my father's reputation. I couldn't let that happen. I contacted Agent Rodriguez at the FBI through encrypted channels, providing him with evidence that would exonerate Mitchell and implicate the real perpetrators. 2 weeks later, the FBI raided Morrison Industries' accounting department and arrested Chief Financial Officer David Park instead of James Mitchell. The evidence trail I'd provided led them directly to the real fraudsters while protecting an innocent man. My father was furious about the FBI raid, but he had no idea his own CTO had triggered it. "Someone leaked information to the feds," he told me during an emergency meeting. "I want you to audit our entire digital infrastructure. Find out how they got access to our financial records." I spent the next month conducting an investigation into the security breach, ultimately concluding that the leak came from an external hack of our email servers. My father accepted my report completely, never suspecting that I was the source. But financial fraud wasn't enough. I needed something bigger, something that would personally destroy my father's reputation forever. That's when I started investigating Senator Bradley's death in 2008. Using my access to my father's private files, I discovered he'd kept detailed records of his corruption network. Names, dates, amounts, methods, everything documented like a criminal mastermind's diary. The Viktor Kozlov payments were all there. $2.5 million transferred through Morrison Industries' Swiss subsidiary to Kozlov's account, disguised as security consulting fees. But I also found communication records between my father and Kozlov, discussing natural termination protocols and cardiac event simulation. The murder wasn't just contracted, it was planned in horrifying detail. 15 years later, I had access to everything: the original confession, the payment records, the planning documents, and the cover-up communications. The plan crystallized: simultaneous release of financial fraud evidence and murder confession, timed to maximize damage and eliminate any chance of cover-up or damage control. On March 15, 2024, exactly 16 years after I recorded his confession, I triggered the bomb that would vaporize Richard Morrison's entire existence. But first, I wanted him to know exactly who was destroying him. At 5:30 a.m., I walked into his office while he was preparing for an early meeting with investors. He looked up, surprised to see me there so early. "Alex, what's going on?" I sat down across from him at the same desk where everything had started 16 years ago. "I need to tell you something, Mr. Morrison, something I should have mentioned during my interview." He sensed the change in my tone, the formality that had replaced our comfortable working relationship. "What is it?" "My name isn't actually Alex Morrison. It's Alexander Morrison. I legally changed it 15 years ago when I turned 18. I watched his face as the pieces started clicking together. The familiarity he'd always felt, the intensity, the methodical planning, the way I'd survived things that would break most people. "You see, Mr. Morrison, I'm the son you threw out for discovering your darkest secret. I'm the scared 16-year-old boy who recorded you confessing to Senator Bradley's murder." His face went white, then red, then something between terror and rage. "That's impossible. You're dead. You had to be dead. No one could survive 15 years on the streets." "But I did survive. And I didn't just survive, I thrived. I built companies, made millions, and most importantly, I gathered the evidence that's going to destroy you completely. I pulled out my phone and played the original recording from 2008. His voice, 16 years younger but unmistakably his. I killed Senator Bradley myself, made it look like a heart attack. You kept that? After all these years? I kept everything, Dad. The recording, the investigation files, the payment records to Viktor Kozlov, the offshore accounts, the fake contracts. Everything you thought you'd hidden, I've been documenting for 16 years. He lunged across the desk, trying to grab my phone, but I was ready for that reaction. Too late. Everything's already uploaded to encrypted servers with dead man switches. If anything happens to me, it all goes public automatically. What do you want? Money? Control of the company? I'll give you anything. I don't want anything from you. I want everything taken away from you. The same way you took everything away from me. I stood up and walked to his window, the same window where he'd watched me leave 15 years ago. The attack begins in 30 minutes. FBI raids, media releases, federal indictments. By noon today, you'll be in federal custody. By tomorrow, Morrison Industries will be worthless. By next month, you'll be facing life in prison. You're my son! How can you destroy your own father? I turned to face him one last time. You stopped being my father the night you chose your secrets over your child. Today, you reap what you sowed. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Dad? That scared little boy you threw away? He says hello. The attack began at 6 a.m. Eastern Time across multiple fronts simultaneously. The Wall Street Journal received a complete package of Morrison Industries' financial fraud documentation. The Washington Post got the Senator Bradley murder evidence. CNN obtained the original 2008 audio recording. The FBI received copies of everything, plus additional evidence of ongoing corruption. I watched from my office as FBI agents seized files, computers, and personal belongings. My father was arrested at 10:15 a.m., led away in handcuffs while news cameras captured every humiliating moment. But the most satisfying part was his expression when Agent Rodriguez read him his rights. Complete bewilderment at how his perfect plan had unraveled so completely. The stock price collapsed from $87 to $3 in 4 hours. The company lost $2.8 billion in market value before trading was permanently suspended. Major investors filed lawsuits demanding billions in damages. Within 24 hours, every charity board expelled him. His country club membership was revoked. His political allies issued statements condemning these shocking allegations. His business partners terminated all relationships immediately. The man who'd thrown his 16-year-old son into the streets was now a pariah facing life in federal prison. 3 days later, I received a call from his criminal defense attorney. Mr. Morrison would like to speak with you about a potential plea agreement. He's willing to cooperate fully in exchange for... Tell Mr. Morrison that his bastard son says hello. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, what did you say? Alexander Morrison, the son he disowned 15 years ago for discovering his crimes. Tell him Alex is calling in that debt now. I hung up and immediately received a frantic call from the prison. My father was demanding to speak with me, screaming about how this was impossible, how his son was a homeless nobody who couldn't possibly have orchestrated this. I didn't take the call. Instead, I had my attorney issue a statement to the media. Alex Morrison, CTO of Morrison Industries and estranged son of Richard Morrison, has been cooperating with federal authorities in their investigation of corporate fraud and the Senator Bradley murder case. The revelation that the whistleblower was his own son added another layer of humiliation to an already devastating scandal. 6 months later, Richard Morrison pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, racketeering, fraud, and 12 counts of political corruption. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Morrison Industries was liquidated to pay legal settlements and fraud restitution. The corporate headquarters was sold to a renewable energy company that renamed it the Bradley Center for Government Ethics. I used my insider knowledge to purchase key assets at bankruptcy auction, including their most valuable technology patents and real estate holdings. The total cost, $47 million. The actual value, $600 million. My net worth went from $15 million to $400 million overnight. But the sweetest revenge came during his sentencing hearing. The judge allowed victim impact statements from Senator Bradley's family members. His daughter spoke about how her father's mysterious heart attack had devastated their family and derailed important environmental legislation. Then I stood up. Your Honor, I'm Alexander Morrison, the defendant's son. 15 years ago, I was a 16-year-old boy who accidentally discovered my father's confession to murder. When I tried to tell him what I'd heard, he threw me out of his house and threatened to have me institutionalized if I ever spoke about it. I spent 15 years homeless, building the skills and resources necessary to bring this evidence to light. Today, justice is finally possible for Senator Bradley's family and the American people who deserved his honest service. I want Richard Morrison to know that the son he threw away for learning his secret has spent every day since then working to ensure he would face consequences for his crimes. Richard Morrison stared at me with the same rage I'd seen 15 years earlier, but now he was the powerless one in handcuffs. The judge sentenced him to life plus 80 years. Walking out of that courthouse, I thought about the 16-year-old boy who'd stood in the rain with nothing but a recording and a promise of justice. That boy had kept his word. Today I run Morrison Technologies, a clean energy company built from the ashes of my father's corrupt empire. We're valued at $1.2 billion and employ 3,000 people working on sustainable solutions. My name is Alex Morrison, and this is how a homeless teenager with a secret recording destroyed a billionaire and inherited his kingdom.